Let's now cross to the main stage for our first speaker of the day, Tania Seary, who is the founder of Procurious and the brains behind the Big Idea Summit.
Peak performance is about being ready to jump. Ready to jump to that next job, that next assignment, really any personal challenge that you have. And today, in Industry 4.0, where we're faced with so many changes, it's going to be critical that we're able to jump and be ready to seize the next opportunity that we're presented with. There's a real common misconception that the C-suite, the CEOs, the CFOs, the CIOs know it all and they've got it covered. But I'm here to tell you that that's not actually the case. The executives are just as concerned and worried and thinking about the unthinkables as the next person, and they're looking for people who can jump in and offer solutions. And part of our goal at Procurious is to make sure that procurement and supply chain are the first with the answers. So how do we do that? How can we be the ones that the C-level turns to for the answers? Well, I think the first thing, and I'm sure that we all agree, is that we actually need to know where the C-suite's heading. One of the big gaps we have in procurement and supply chain is actually understanding what is the corporate objective? Where is this ship sailing to? Where is the point on the horizon that we're all heading to? And that's probably the number one opportunity for any aspiring professional today, is to actually get their heads in the space of where the organisation is heading. And you don't need an MBA, you don't need to have studied strategy. What you really need to do is just stay connected and make sure that you understand and read about your company and understand where the company's heading. Probably one of the biggest frustrations for most professionals, and when most young professionals want to jump ship and move to another company, is when they just get so frustrated with not understanding where they fit within the whole picture and why decisions are being made. And let's face it, most companies are going through one or multiple different phases of changes at any point in time. In our profession, we're always in a cost-down environment. But a lot of you are also going through transformation, or your industries are being totally disrupted and you're needing to totally transform or innovate what you're doing and what your company delivers. So these are really big changes that we have to make. Our personal careers, even if you're the start of your career, you've generally made a bit of a reputation for yourself. You're known as the cost cutter, or someone who's really good at innovation, or someone who can bring the organisation together. But the challenge is that whether that personal style actually aligns with where the company's going. And as I've joked with people, you know, heaven is probably where you're the innovator and Steve Jobs comes back from wherever he's presiding today and is your CEO. Perfect. Or you're the ultimate cost cutter and Warren Buffett comes in as your CEO or chairman. Absolutely fantastic. But as we know, life is not like that. And often we have to change our personal styles to align with where the company's going. So I think that's one of the first changes that young professionals and even more mature professionals need to make today, is to actually understand where their organisation is going and to change their alignment and get in line with that direction. So, okay, we've had our personal moment, we've looked in the mirror. One of my favourite sayings is that the only common denominator in your career is you. So you've got to look in the mirror. It's always easy to look at everyone else and say, you know, it's my boss, it's my peers and whoever. So that's probably the first step, is to look at yourself. But okay, we're aligned, we're ready to go. The next thing really is to make sure that we can deliver the goods. And I think this is a real challenge that a lot of people have today in the profession. We're expecting to be promoted, to be given lots of opportunities, when we actually may not have the runs on the board. And I was really interested, probably a lot of you, anyone who follows me knows that I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. I'm always there. But that's where I get a lot of information, and that's where I feel like I understand the pulse of the profession and the procurement, because all I follow is procurement and supply chain professionals. So I really get to see what people are talking about. And I was really interested just this week to read a piece by Ross Adler. I'm not sure if anyone else read this, but it talked about how you can identify top talent and best hiring opportunities. And I felt like that was a great insight for aspiring professionals to actually look down the checklist. He really recommends using phone interviews because I'm sure we'll hear about our biases a lot today, but actually visually or sitting against someone really messes up the hiring process. But I'll digress because we could talk about hiring all day. The key point was that how do we identify people that have a growth performance? And I think if we're talking about peak performance, that's what we're looking for. And on this slide, I'll show you what Ross Adler has said. And if you go down that list, it shows things like volunteering, gets stretch project opportunities, puts themselves forward for awards, gets rehired by bosses. And I think it's just a very handy checklist for us to look, particularly if we're a high potential employee. And I think if we summarise all those things, we can get it down to 3 really basic points. And I'm sorry, they're very boring, they're immutable truths from my perspective. Number 1, get on with your boss. And actually, get on with most people you work with. I love that movie, Bridge of Spies. I don't know if anyone else has watched it, but one of my favourite lines in there is, the boss may not always be right, but the boss is always the boss. And I think that's one of the big things with your career is obviously you don't want to be misled or do anything unethical, but at the end of the day, your boss is the biggest proponent for your career. But so are your stakeholders within your organisation and your suppliers. All of these people can recommend you for your next job. So if you are in your peak performance and you're ready, those people can actually be some of your biggest proponents. The second common theme for high potential is to put yourself forward. Now, I know a few of the more mature members of the audience will sort of scoff at that, and I think it's something important that Generation Next needs to be conscious of, is that your hiring managers and your bosses may be a bit wary that you're putting yourself forward too often. So I don't want to discourage anyone for putting themselves forward, but certainly there's this conception, or perception I should say, that Generation Next are expecting promotions too quickly. But the reality is, unless you put yourself forward for that next project, unless you're in the fray, unless you're on social media, unless you're doing something where you're visible, the reality of the situation is that you probably won't be remembered in the next round of conversations. And I'm talking totally out of line here, and I've got absolutely no data to back it up, but I will go with a generic statement which says that women may be the worst at this. Because I believe that women often think, I'm doing my job, I'm doing the right thing, I'll just keep working hard, and may not put themselves forward as much. But I'm going to leave that to the professionals today to either confirm or put that one to bed for us. So put yourself forward. The third point, and I mentioned it earlier, is really just to deliver. There's nothing that beats building a trophy cabinet, and that's one of the things that I encourage everyone. Have deliverable projects that you can actually put an ROI to, that you can point to. We were just having a chat earlier over coffee, and we were saying when we go through a CV, we look for the numbers. What have you delivered? And can others actually demonstrate and agree that you've delivered that? That's the number one thing. If you're at peak performance and you want to move on to the next level, you have to have a number of projects that have actually demonstrated. Thank you for your time today, and I just wanted to wrap up. I often get feedback when I speak that I don't have any actionable outcomes, and just for a bit of entertainment, I thought I'd summarise by saying some of the quotes I had. Be ready to jump. You are the common denominator in your career. Align yourself with your organisation. The boss may not always be right, but the boss is always the boss. Final point and a new point. You may not be able to change the world, but you can change your category. And I think that's my final inspiration for everyone. No matter where you are in your organisation, you can demonstrate leadership that others can recognise. You can make sure that your category strategies align with the business. You can make sure that you've considered all the environmental, economic and social outputs or impacts of that category. And you can also explore how AI and RPA can be used in that category. So although you may be in this huge organisation, you can really focus on the areas of control. Thank you.